You are listening to the Doug Hagmann Radio Show, weekdays 9 to 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And now the man behind the mic, a private investigator with over 30 years under his belt, Doug Hagmann.
Good morning, everyone. It's 6 a.m. on the west coast of America, 9 a.m. here in the east. Welcome to Hagmann. It's the Doug Hagmann Investigative Hour for today. It's Monday, September 24th, 2018. That's right, I'm back. I'm going to thank you for joining me this morning. I'm going to be taking an in-depth look at tomorrow's headlines today, as usual, as I delve deep into a number of important issues that face us all across America and globally. For those listening in the West, whether it's the UK or Australia, thanks again for joining me. It was exactly 1 month ago today. That was my last broadcast on the Doug Hagmann Investigative Hour. And what have I been doing for the last 30 days, you might ask? For those who aren't aware or haven't been listening outside of this program, I just want to give you a brief update. The reasons, and I'm speaking from the heart here, I'm giving you the full scope of things right now. It happened about, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks ago. I started developing some symptoms of some internal problems that mimicked, I would say, a bleeding ulcer. So that's how it started. Extreme severe abdominal pain. And long story short, I did seek medical attention, and I had some preliminary tests done. And the doctor had said, look, you've got some issues, you've got some problems, medical problems. I suggest bed rest for the next couple of weeks and lighten your schedule a little bit. And so I was being treated symptomatically. And I had to let something go. Of course, our flagship show, 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, the Hagmann Report, I couldn't, there was nothing I could do. I mean, I really needed to be there for that show. And so something had to go. So I put the Doug Hagmann Radio Show on hiatus for 30 days. And as I said, it was 30 days ago. Today was the last show. And I want to thank you, listeners, for bearing with me as I overcame or was attempting to overcome the medical issues. So no secret there. I just want to be fully transparent with everyone. And that was... And I'm still battling some of these issues. I still have some diagnostic tests to go through. Again, being treated symptomatically as opposed to with anything definite. And it was during this time that instead of taking bed rest, what I promptly did, against the doctor's orders, which he's not too happy with me. Over the last 30 days, I've traveled to a half a dozen states, to the District of Columbia twice, to Branson, Missouri, and of course, continued the investigative process on a number of very important investigations that involve the Pedogate issues, Pedogate matters, for which you're seeing now today some headlines, and I'm not going to point them out. You can certainly see for yourself the results of my involvement, whether it be on a consultation type of role or direct involvement. You can see that we are winning the war against the pedophiles out there, and it's really. Wow, you talk about gut-wrenching, literally gut-wrenching. That was part of it. And of course, in addition to that, I've had some additional illnesses. I'm kind of breaking down, right? A little bit. And then, of course, we had the good news, the birth of a grandchild. My daughter, Jackie, my youngest daughter, Jackie, gave birth to just a very healthy baby boy. And Jackie, of course, is married to Eric the Tech. So Eric the Tech was away on leave for a couple of weeks. He's back today. Welcome, Eric, and congratulations, Jackie and Eric. So that, of course, the pictures, there are a couple of pictures, and for privacy reasons, I'm not going to get too much further into that, of course, at the request of my daughter and, of course, Eric. And I understand this because we receive many, many threats and such, and I'm not going to expose my family into that, but congratulations, Eric, the tech, and Jackie. And there's a photograph, I believe, on my personal Twitter, which is, my personal Twitter is at Hagmann PI, and then my personal Facebook as well, which is Douglas.Hagmann. You can see there my grandson. And I met him for the first time about 4 days after his birth. He was born when we were in Washington, D.C. the first time. Quite cute, let me tell you. And then, of course, we had some staff changes. We had to reorganize some things here at the studio and at the offices. And I'm not going to get into that except to say that we have, we are lean and mean. We are a lean, mean fighting machine at this point. So we underwent that, took care of that. And in addition to all of that, we've been fighting the censorship and banning and shadow banning issues as well, behind the scenes. In some parts, overtly as well. Going to Washington, we had the opportunity, my son and I had the opportunity to actually speak to members of the administration, of the Donald Trump administration, about this very issue. And interestingly enough, just to share this with you, myself, my son, Dave Hodges, and the person who will not be mentioned, we had a meeting in Missouri about the meetings we had in Washington, D.C. I guess that makes sense, right? And it was during this one meeting that the individual that was with us, we were talking about the censorship, about the banning issue, and about what is needed to fight to make our voices heard. The biggest thing, as you well know, and as I said this from the very beginning, I said, look, this is going to be a huge issue. And I was saying this for months about the banning, the shadow banning, about the censorship, about silencing the conservative voices. I was saying this. And of course, me personally, and the Hagmann Report and this show, we're fighting this on a number of levels, including lawsuits. And of course, I am the defendant in a lawsuit, in a federal lawsuit that initially demanded $10 million. I'm not supposed to talk about this, obviously, and nor will I. But it's common knowledge that for 2.5, almost 3 years now, we've been fighting this defamation lawsuit. In my personal view, what I can say is that I do believe that we were one of the first, if not the first, entity in the legal arena to be clipped by a lawsuit that, in my view, is designed not necessarily to prevail, but to drain us of resources, to direct our attention, to divert our attention, to keep me especially occupied. Because as I've spoken before, and again, this is not anything that I'm speaking out of turn or out of school about. It's cost us just a tremendous amount of money. In fact, at this meeting I was referencing in Missouri, this gentleman that was with me said, do you have a legal defense fund? I said, yeah, it's called a second mortgage, and it's called a third mortgage. And I'm being serious about that. This is how we operate. We're not a 501c3. We're just a corporation, for-profit corporation. And you do what you've got to do to fight things. So all of this combined for the last 30 days, this is what I've been fighting. I've been putting in a lot of attention into advancing not just our voices, but your voices. But at this meeting in Branson, Missouri, it was almost surreal as during this meeting, the gentleman that we were meeting with, his cell phone rang. He answered it. And the voice on the other end of the phone, I'm not going to identify any of these people. the individual said, yes, I'm going to be meeting with President Trump either Monday or Tuesday, and just wanted to get your take on some of the things with regard to the censorship issue that we should perhaps bring up that we haven't thought of yet. Now, you have to understand, I'm sitting there, and I know the caliber of people that are in this gentleman's circle. I understand that, but for that to be spoken, and that for us to have that opportunity to provide the information to the president directly, to me, that's a heavy responsibility. And I was thinking, boy, I better get this right. I've got one chance, in this case, one chance at this. And it was that conversation that I was able to think back to the emails that many of you sent to me, saying, these are my concerns, or this is what I think. And I've been collecting these emails. I've been printing the emails and taking notes and paying very close attention to what you, the listener of this show, have been saying that your concerns are, your observations. And I gauged my response or gave my response based on your concerns. So I was able to say the concerns of my listeners for the Doug Hagmann Radio Show, as well as our flagship show, are this, and this. Very spot on, very pointed. Now, subsequent to that interaction, I was informed that that meeting did take place, and your voice, your concerns, the points that you made were shared with the President of the United States. That is what I've been doing over the last 30 days. That's part of it anyway. So again, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I thank you for allowing me, this program, to be in your car, in your living room, in your place of business. Because I know that you only have so many hours in the day, and you can only listen to so many people. You can only... Your choices are vast out there. There are so many different new media programs. But choosing me, I understand the responsibility that I've got to you. So I will always be upfront to the extent possible without violating any confidences. I will always be upfront with you, telling you what I know, telling you what's going on. So I think I owe you that explanation. So from the bottom of my heart, again, I thank you for sticking with me over the last 30 days. And thank you for supporting this program. Thank you for supporting the Hagmann Report, our flagship show. Thank you for supporting us. You can support us, of course, via Patreon, via PayPal. Our mailing address is on the front page of our website, hagmannreport.com. But most importantly, thank you for sharing this program with others. And thank you for your prayers, because I can tell you this, prayers mean so much and they make a big difference. So again, thank you, one and all. Thank you so much. My promise to you henceforth here is to keep this program going, keep the Hagmann Report going, and making that difference, because I will share with you in a little bit more detail than I have before what we have accomplished, what this program and the flagship show has accomplished, especially within the contacts within the District of Columbia, within D.C. If you noticed on the Hagmann Report or my Twitter, you'll have to forgive me. They kind of all run together. I'm not the best at handling social networking. I just don't really care for it that much. And of course, being censored, that's an issue. That's a problem all the time. But you'll see photographs up there. It was during our visit to Washington, D.C., and I want to thank Keith Hansen from WNTK, the voice of New Hampshire. I want to thank him very much for helping us make certain contacts in Washington, D.C., opening the door for us. He's an amazing guy, by the way. And it was those contacts that that we were provided that have allowed us to advance, to increase our, I'm just trying to think of the right words. I don't want to overstate things, but I don't want to understate things either. To really become involved, or to really make your concerns known to the president, his staff. And it's not like I've met the president or anything like that. Of course not. But his aides, including but not limited to Kellyanne Conway, and others, they know our names, and they know about the broadcasts, and they know what's going on. Most importantly, they know what's going on with the new media. And one thing Keith Hansen did say, and I want to make this point very clear, and I totally agree with Keith Hansen about this. When we talk about the new media, or the media aside from the corporate media, you've got to take away, of course, CBS, NBC, CNN, and even Fox. Just move those aside. You've got this environment, or this venue of other media outlets. And when Keith and I were speaking in Washington, D.C., he said, the media, the internet media, the other media can be broken down into two different types. Now, I'm paraphrasing and summarizing, so if I don't get this 100% accurate, forgive me. But he said, there's the new media, and then there's the alt media. And there's a distinct difference between the two. The new media and the alt media. The alternative media versus the new media. There are differences between the two, and of course the differences speak to the credibility, the reliability of information, the non-hyperbolic aspect of the new media versus the alternative media. And this is where we want to be present and recognized as the new media, as opposed to the alternative media that operates or is fueled by speculation, anonymity. That's all fine, well, and good, except the responsibility that we have to you to bring you the most important vetted information. We cannot squander that opportunity, or we cannot afford to stumble and provide you with improper, incorrect, or even overstated information. So so I consider this platform, as well as our nightly program, the new media, as opposed to the alternative media. I hope that made sense to you, and if not, we can certainly talk about this in the future. But that's something that really is, I recognize the importance of the information that we bring you, that I bring you. That's vetted. That's that's not overstated. The anonymous sources aside. Now they do have their place, of course. Anonymous sources have their place. But we've got to vet the information and bring only the vetted, solid information to you. And as an aside, as I sit here with Lady the studio dog, she's now back into this. Okay, what are you waking me up at 4 a.m. for? Again. Oh, we're doing this again. This Lady the studio dog is right next to me. And she's excited about being back, as am I. So again, thank you for allowing us to be back, me to be back in your computer, radios, or whatever. So thank you for that. But by the way, I just have to almost pinch myself and say, wow, I'm back. I love this, because I love doing this. And again, Keith Hansen and I were talking about this, about what we do. And how much we really care. I looked at the picture of my grandson, me holding my grandson. I'm thinking, this is why we do it, isn't it? This is why it's not for us, it's for our children and their children. The legacy that we will leave for our kids. And each one of you have got that too, are in that position. It's up to you as well. You can make a decision to make a difference or not make a difference. And those of you listening to this program are making a difference. And I thank you for that. Thanks for being alongside of me, alongside of us, for being in this fight, because the fight is bigger than all of us. The issues are bigger than all of us. I just want to encourage you, despite all of the direness of what we see, we can, and I do believe we will prevail. Ultimately, of course, we do prevail. We know how the story ends. We know how the book ends. We do prevail in the end against the evil, the nefarious, the machinations of those people that occupy the deep state, but we will prevail. Oh, it's going to be a bumpy road for sure. But one thing I've learned over the last 4 weeks, don't lose hope. Don't lose sight of what our goals are. You know, I met so many people, nice people in Branson, Missouri, who came up and say, you're making a difference, and just the accolades. But you know, really, it's not us. It's not me. It's all of us together. And the moment that someone gets hung up on, well, oh boy, it's the job I'm doing. No. Stop it. Leave your egos at the door. And that, by the way, is the one thing I want to mention as well that I've seen and I've learned over the last month is there is a really big problem in the new and alternative media arena. There are people that, I'm sorry to say that there are people that are very hung up on themselves. And believe me, it's easy not to get hung up on yourselves. Or for me, you know, when I'm walking Lady, the studio dog, with a plastic bag and a scooper behind her, I know my place. You know what I mean, right? I know that I'm no one special. But together we are something special, and we can make a difference. I guess it's just, again, I'm speaking from my heart. This is the first day back after a month absence, and just laying it all out for you. Just speaking from the heart, and just so glad to be back, and just so grateful to have met so many of you in Branson, and seeing your emails, and Walt and Kevin and Bob and Maggie and all of you. Thank you so very much for everything that you're doing and have done, and the encouraging words. And Karen Rogers, just a fantastic person, a great author. Thank you for all of your encouragement, and thank you for your kind words. But know that we are all in this together. I hope that made sense to you. I really do. And I hope that it's come across as really from the bottom of my heart, meaning that my wife and I were speaking last night, and she said, "Well, tomorrow's your first day back on your morning show. Don't wake me up when you leave." but she asked if I was excited, if I was looking forward to it, and I said, "Absolutely, I'm looking forward to it." And folks, I've got some big changes in the works, both for the flagship show, but especially for the Doug Hagmann Radio Show. And those changes revolve around the contacts made in Washington, D.C. Just to be clear, we have established inroads to the press office in Washington, at the White House, also at the Pentagon, at the State Department, as well as some other areas, and that we're still working on. So we have correspondents. I've developed relationships with correspondents that occupy the seat, at least one of the seats you see at the White House press conference, press pool. And again, thank you, Keith Hansen, for opening certain doors. And I've been able to speak to people who have relationships with members of this current presidential administration. So these are the people I will be speaking to directly to bring you information for this program. And that, to me, is a big deal, because that's directly from the source through me to you. So I'm very excited about that. Now, as usual, I spent the better part of the weekend looking at different news items and analyzing different news items. And there's a rule of thumb, at least for us, and you can take this, for every hour of aired content, I spend 2 to 3 hours roughly, of research, note-taking, printing out materials and such. So for every hour, it's 2 to 3 hours worth of research. And that goes for the evening show as well. But just so you have an understanding of how we do things and how I do things. Also, immediately before the show starts, I've got 2 or 3 different people that I will contact by phone or sometimes by email to say, okay, what's the latest on subject A, B, and C? Depending on who I'm speaking to, will determine the subject, and then I'll get a response back pretty much right away, especially if it's by phone. If it's by email, it might be 10 or 15 minutes. But this is how this information factory works, just to give you an idea of what changes or what has been going on. What has been going on. So again, to go back to the 2 visits to Washington D.C. in the last 30 days, the initial visit was to hone those contacts. So now the information, instead of coming through a third party, comes directly through from a member of the administration. Just to be clear on this, because it's important that you understand and that you come to rely on the information, on the accuracy of the information that I provide each morning. And the other part as well, just to let you know that we've met, that I've forged relationships with people, for example, from different organizations. For example, like Judicial Watch, Freedom Watch, other organizations like that. The Federation for American Immigration Reform, for example, to list another one. And from these organizations, members, former congressmen and current congressmen, former congressmen, including Tom Tancredo, who's become a really, he's a great guy, and I think a great friend of this program. A lot of information there. Spent some time with him. Congressman Jim Jordan, for example. Now, I'm name dropping because I need to tell you who these sources are. And then, of course, with other organizations, Chris Farrell, Tom Fenton, and others. And then journalists. You may think, I just put up a tweet yesterday about Ann Coulter. My goodness. Oh, my goodness, did I ever... You talk about some scathing rebukes about that. But regardless of what you think of Ann Coulter, the information and the relationship there, it's just look at the information. That's all. You may not care for her. That's fine. But she has a lot of information. And then sheriffs all across the country. So all of this to bring you the best content. And I just, again, this first time back, or first program back over the last 30 days, just to give you an inventory of what I've been doing. I haven't been sitting, at my television watching reruns of Green Acres or, any other program. This has been a very fruitful period of time that you've allowed me to do, and I thank you. And I thank you for coming back to this. But I ask you a favor. I ask that you post this program and the rest of the programs, the Doug Hagmann Radio Show. Share this on social networking. Share this with your friends. Tell others about the program, because it's only going to get better. All right. Now, some news of the day is I've gone through pretty much just about every source I could possibly go through over this past weekend. There really are a handful of items that are of extreme importance. Of course, you've got the Kavanaugh confirmation, the accusations of sexual improprieties from well over 3 decades ago. And what's that all about? Well, that's really not about his behavior 3.5 decades ago, as much as it is about sending a message, the deep state sending a message to all of us saying, we are not going to allow you to nominate people to the Supreme Court that will alter the course of history. We're not going to allow you a conservative or even a constitutional position on the Supreme Court. We've spent, the deep state, spent a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of assets to put in their people into judgeships, federal judgeships, and now into the Supreme Court. And this is being threatened by Donald Trump. And again, like him, don't like him, it doesn't matter. The bigger picture here is what we need to take a look at. And that is, again, the fact that the Constitution of the United States is the target. The constitutionalists are the target. Those people who adhere to the literal interpretation of the United States Constitution and the rule of law are the targets today. The Kavanaugh hearings, when we arrived at Washington, D.C. for our appearance on Radio Row there, and we were one of 63 invited media outlets to the FAIR conference at Capitol Hill, and that's the Federation for American Immigration Reform. We were one of 63 there. Radio talk show hosts from Honolulu to New Hampshire. And Keith Hansen, again, thank you, Keith Hansen, for opening that door for us. But just to watch and see the things that were happening there, but see, this bubble, the Washington, D.C. bubble, the deep state, the swamp that is Washington, they're very active in fighting the people outside of that bubble, the people who comprise middle America, the people who work for a living. So to get to the meat of the information that you need to know from this broadcast, what I will do, or what I'll have, in fact, we'll play. There is a 4-minute, 50-second segment that I'd like you to hear. This came from Sunday Morning Futures yesterday. This is Tom Fitton talking about Kavanaugh, talking about the declassification issue. There's really a handful of stories here that are of extreme importance. You've got the Kavanaugh nomination, which is not necessarily important for the reasons that people or that the mainstream media is out there talking about. Then you've got the declassification of documents, which is an entirely different aspect that you really need to know about what's really behind this. And tomorrow I'm going to spend a lot of time on that subject, because that is so deep, and that threatens the very existence of the deep state. The declassification of those documents, of the documents that comprise the FISA warrant, and why the pushback is so strong. Again, tomorrow's program will be dedicated to that. But I selected this audio clip because Tom Fitton covers the waterfront, I believe, better than anyone else in the media yesterday about what is important today. So starting off with the meat of what's important, let's go to Tom Fitton, Sunday Morning Futures. Yesterday, it was broadcast covering the waterfront on what the issues are. Take a listen, 4 minutes, just a little over 4.5 minutes, I believe it is. And here's Tom Fitton with Maria on Sunday Morning Futures.
I want to bring in Tom Fitton right now. He is the president of Judicial Watch. Tom, thanks very much for weighing in here. We have a date, October 19th. Your thoughts?
Well, going back to the New York Times story, we're talking about what was going on in the Justice Department, and we can't separate that, Nellie Orr, jokes about recording the president or revoking the 25th Amendment, with the appointment of a special counsel. It was all part of the piece. It was all part of the discussion that was going on, talking about removing the president of the United States. And one of the options was appointing a special counsel. So now we have this Mueller special counsel that's harassing the president and doing as much damage to the presidency as any outrageous effort directly to remove him. It's hampering his ability to hire and fire people. It's hampering his ability to conduct foreign policy. and it's hampering his ability to monitor and take care of the corruption going on at the Justice Department and FBI.
You know, it's interesting. Mark Penn is going to be joining us momentarily, and he wrote a great op-ed in The Hill this weekend. And in it, he writes about Rosenstein and his wry sense of humor. I understand that a lot of people say he's sarcastic, but in another one of his jokes, quote unquote, he appears to have quite the sense of humor. He raised turning the tables on Congress by reviewing the emails of members and staff who were there to gather information from the FBI. Oh, just kidding. Do you remember him saying that a couple of months ago when Devin Nunes demanded documents be sent to Congress as part of this investigation? And he said, well, maybe we should just turn the table and start looking at your communication. Just kidding.
Nope. Yeah, and was Mr. Rosenstein joking when he signed off on that dirty FISA spy warrant targeting the Trump team based on the Clinton DNC dossier that he's instrumental in withholding full information about from the American people? There's a real crisis here, but you know, removing Rosenstein, removing Sessions, it doesn't get to the issue of the special counsel operation that would continue. And of course, if the president were to do anything like remove an official, he'd be subject to criminal investigation again. Look, this crowd thought he wasn't allowed to remove FBI Director Comey, and he went after one of his cronies for corruption, and the reaction was a special counsel. Now the Democrats are saying that if he removes Rosenstein, they're going to have more reason to impeach him. He needs to challenge the Mueller operation. He's being inhibited in his role as president. And if the Justice Department won't do it, or if he declines to do it directly, he should seek court relief.
Do you believe the American people will see those documents, will see the FISA warrant, so that the American people can clearly understand how they got a warrant to wiretap an American citizen based on unverified information?
We've already seen part of the warrants. I think we'll see the rest of the warrants. The question is when. You know, the deep state's approach here is out of the page, is a page out of the Nixon handbook, which is the modified limited hangout. Let it come out slowly over a period of time, and hopefully people won't remember, and it gives the Mueller operation as much time as he needs to try to damage the president.
It's quite extraordinary when you consider all of the malfeasance on the other side, when we see how they wanted to stop Donald Trump badly from becoming president, and a cabal of individuals put their finger on the scale to change the course of an election because they just didn't like him. We need to see the evidence on how they came up with this idea that Donald Trump had anything to do with Russia meddling. And I just wonder if there is going to be any accountability here, Tom.
Well, you know, Congress can do more. I appreciate they're pushing for the documents following Judicial Watch's lead on many of these issues, but they should bring in Mr. Mueller into Congress and ask him questions about not necessarily who's going to interview tomorrow, but how he was appointed, his conflicts of interest, why it is he can't find any Republicans or conservatives to work on his prosecution team. This special counsel is immune from scrutiny, and I'm just tired of talking about Bruce Orr. I want to talk about Mr. Mueller, who was using Bruce Orr's information to target and harass this president.
Well, they also are pressuring now around anything the president does related to the Supreme Court. They want to stop Brett Kavanaugh. Real quick, your thought on that. Will they be successful?
I don't think they will, although I think they're going to have to take some tough steps to cut this inquiry off or to shorten it. I think the idea that we need weeks of discussion to figure out what's up and down about these allegations is just as a result of poor leadership.
Tom, good to have you on the program. Thank you so much.
It can be figured out quickly.
Okay, we'll be watching this upcoming week where we could actually see them both testify on Thursday.
All right, that was Tom Fitton on Sunday Morning Features yesterday. The reason I selected that audio clip, there were two related issues that he was discussing in his interview. And I think these two, although they're seemingly disparate, they're actually closely related. He spent 3/4, easy 80% of the interview talking about the FISA abuse, about Robert Mueller, about Rosenstein, the Rosenstein revelations about wearing a wire and such. And I'm going to be getting into that a little bit deeper tomorrow, or a lot deeper tomorrow, because that is so important. But they closed out the interview by talking about Kavanaugh. Now, when we were in Washington, D.C., and allow me to get my notes here from D.C. We arrived there on the first day of the Kavanaugh hearings. And what Joe and I witnessed there, and you've heard this before, but I want to give you names and I want to give you some additional information that I think you need to know, because the individuals involved in the Kavanaugh disrupting the hearings, and the individuals of the deep state are the same people or closely related. You've got several groups. Let's talk about Kavanaugh first, because again, these are the same people with respect to Kavanaugh as the same people involved in the deep state operational tactics to bring down President Trump. So you've got several groups that organize people to disrupt the Supreme Court nomination and confirmation hearings of Brett Kavanaugh. When Joe and I arrived in D.C. that day, the first day of the hearings, we witnessed at the Capitol building a number of groups. Now, we went, I don't want to say undercover because that has different connotations, but we went very quietly and watched. And we watched the actions of coordinators and identified the coordinators who were actually allowing people into or sending people into the hearings to disrupt the hearings. And then when they were arrested, they came out and they provided these individuals with money. That's right, cash money to take care of the fines that they had to pay. Now, we saw this with our own eyes. So you have groups encouraging protesters to commit acts of civil disobedience by disrupting the hearings. Frankly, look, you can hear about this, but until you see it with your own eyes, it's almost incomprehensible. Wow. Now, understand this. The Internal Revenue Service, of course, does prohibit giving tax-exempt status, for example, to organizations that plan or encourage illegal activities. And that's exactly what's happening here. Now, there were over 200 people arrested during the 4 days of hearings from September 4th through the 7th. And again, this is when Joe and I were in Washington, D.C. And we saw the roughly 200 people being escorted out of the Capitol building from these hearings. Well, who organized this? These people were organized by Women's March and Center for Popular Democracy Action. The acronym is CPDA. You might want to write that down. Women's March and Center for Popular Democracy Action, CPDA. As a matter of fact, one person had a clipboard, and on the top of the clipboard was the acronym CPDA. Now, that's a 501c4 tax-exempt organization. There was another one, Housing Works. That's a 501c3 tax-exempt status. That 501c3 is reserved for charitable organizations. They're not allowed to be involved in this advocacy, in this civil disobedience and disruption. There was a CPDA representative. You saw it, photographed, handing money to some participants in the disruptions. There was a CPDA representative by the name of Jennifer Flynn Walker, who said on record that the money, in one case $50, was meant to cover fines that participants were expected to incur for disrupting the hearings. And of course, the participants were supposed to return the unused cash. Right. Yeah. Well, there was a website that was set up by Women's March. And this website was seeking and is still seeking willing participants to register. The online form at this Women's March website asked a couple of questions. Can you participate in civil disobedience / risk arrest? Or another option, just civil disobedience without arrest. I can't be arrested. Well, again, this is prohibited by IRS regulations. But as we saw, Lois Lerner, the whole IRS, the corruption within the IRS, do you think there will be any kind of backlash? Of course not. And about the IRS rules, just to be clear, because this is key. if this was conservatives doing this, of course, do you think that there would be any punishment to conservatives? Of course there would be, but there is none for these democratic socialists. And understand that it's the democratic socialists and their ilk that are doing this, that are organizing this. You've got when you look at the individuals that are actually doing the protesting, these people, in my view, and just my personal observation, a lot of them, they don't care. They're just doing it for the money. They don't care who they're doing it for. Now, that's some of them. Others do know, especially the ones who are saying, yeah, I'll risk arrest for this. They're driven by an ideological purpose. But the others are just doing it for the pocket money. Now, the IRS prohibits this. In fact, an organization that planned and sponsored protest demonstrations of which members were urged to commit acts of civil disobedience, they don't qualify as a 501c3 or C4 organization, yet they're doing this. Just remember these names: the Women's March and Center for Popular Democracy Action, CPDA, and Housing Works as well. So when you start looking at when you start following the money trail, this is extremely important. CPDA, this group crowdfunded the money used to cover fines for the hearing disruptors. You're looking at around $10,000 for that 4-day period that was crowdsourced, for about $10,000 in bail money. You've got, obviously, the same people involved in this. George Soros alone has given the CPDA fund over $900,000 over the past 2.5 years, and about another $1.3 million to its sister organization, CPD, since 2014. There's some other major contributors, including the Ford and Weiss Foundations. When you look at the financials for CPDA, that fund, the fiscal year 2016, that's the last data available there, $700,000 in cash. They're cash rich by $700,000. And Women's March raised close to $200,000 on CrowdRise to cancel Kavanaugh. The group offered to reimburse or to pick up travel, accommodation, legal training, and bail costs for the activists. Now, this was an admission by Winnie Wong. I'm not making that name up, honestly. A senior advisor, Winnie Wong. This admission was made to CNN. Women's March has over 500 partners, of whom 100 received a combined total of almost $250 million from Soros in 14 years. This, according to the Media Research Center. Now, I know people have pushed this information to the IRS, provided this information to the IRS. The IRS has not been responsive to this administration. You can find, as a matter of fact, you can find information about this, further information about this, by going to the Epoch Times under the headline, Anti-Kavanaugh Groups Can Lose Nonprofit Status for Disrupting Hearings. This is a dated article, but it gives you the background, the people, the individuals, the groups involved in this. And we stayed, Joe and I stayed at a hotel, which was just down the street from the Capitol. So we walked out the front doors of the hotel, and you can see the Capitol just down the road. And as we were standing there one evening, this is our first evening and the first day of the Kavanaugh hearings, we watched 2 semi-trailers, flatbeds, carrying what looked like, the best way I would describe this, and we did not have cameras available to us at that very moment, and it was very quick, but as they passed by, they looked like trailers, like house trailers would look like on a flatbed. Except the difference was there were either bars or mesh on the windows. One had mesh, like a wire mesh, and the other one had bars, if you will, that were imposed over the exterior of the windows. And these were, as we found out later, were to house and process and house those people who were being arrested at the Capitol. The destination was the Capitol, and that was the processing centers for the people being arrested. None of the everything you're seeing with respect to Kavanaugh, none of it is organic, none of it is spontaneous. It's all planned out, and it's all right in front of our faces. The groups, as I told you, Soros and Democratic Socialists, funded. Now, with respect to Brett Kavanaugh now, and of course, it was during that hearing on the first or second day when we were there that they had to escort Mr. Kavanaugh's wife and 2 young children out of the hearings because they could not guarantee their safety. Think about that. In the Capitol itself, they could not guarantee their safety. Incredible things that we're seeing happen today by the very enemies of our country, by the very enemies of freedom. But this segues into, by the way, you're hearing already the allegations of this Christy Ford just fall apart. But you're hearing more, that there's yet more to come, more women, another woman. And I'm not going to get into the graphic details of these allegations. But the intent here is to delay any confirmation vote, is to delay any placement until after the midterms, because the Democratic Socialists of America, the communists in this country, they believe that they can win in November. They've got it in the bag, which is why, by the way, it's so important that we vote, and we urge everyone to get out and vote. And yes, I know about the black box voting and such, but we at least have to do everything in our power. But the communists in this country, the deep state, believe that they can prevail. They can prevent Kavanaugh from being just the vote. They can delay the vote until after the midterms. And at the very least, they can impeach Kavanaugh should he secure that nomination or that confirmation vote, and forever be looked upon as an illegitimate Supreme Court justice. I remember the hearings with Clarence Thomas. This is far worse than anything that was tossed at Clarence Thomas, although that was horrible. But this is much worse, and it's only going to get worse. We're seeing the lack of leadership in the Republican Party, in the GOP right now. We're seeing this acquiescence to the social justice warriors right now, and it's got to stop. I've got more information on that as well, what's taking place within the GOP leadership and what other congressmen think about what's taking place right now and what their plans are. So stay tuned for this program as the days this week, as additional programs will reveal the information you're not hearing elsewhere, because there's a fight on right now inside Washington, D.C. But all of that is closely related to, of course, the deep state attacks against President Donald Trump. And I've got to say this, I'm grabbing my notes here, so I apologize if you hear rustling of papers. No, I don't. You got to deal with it. What is at stake right now with respect to the declassification of documents is very simple. It's simple in its intent, but complex in its delivery, in my view, or complex in its the various machinations. The ultimate objective, of course, is to nullify President Donald Trump, is to get him out of office, to impeach him or or by any means necessary. But what I will be getting into as future programs this week as they unfold is the fact that you've got a trail that leads directly to Barack Hussein Obama, directly to the White House. And I'll just bring your attention, whet your appetite a bit here for the rest of the programs. Do you recall when Devin Nunes, again, the member of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, went to the White House to review documents, and as a matter of fact, FISA documents, FISA-related documents, the warrant application and FISA-related documents. He went to the White House. Why? Because that's where the documents were kept. Some documents are so sensitive that they're kept at the location where they were either produced or their ultimate destination, in this case, the White House. What does that mean? It means that all roads lead to Barack Hussein Obama and his Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, but he had received in presidential daily briefings information about the deep state operation against Donald Trump. That's what this means. The FBI was weaponized, as you well know, but it was weaponized not just by the DNC, not just by the people for Hillary, but it was weaponized at the highest levels of government, and that being Barack Hussein Obama. And the declassification of the documents, this is why you see Clapper and Comey and Brennan and others just saying, no, you can't declassify this because it'll reveal sources and methods. You're damn right it will. The sources and methods being used by the deep state operatives to unseat or to prevent the seating and then ultimately unseat a duly elected president. You've got a list. All you have to do is follow the bouncing ball from Peter Strzok to his boss, Bill Priestap, to his boss, Andrew McCabe, to his boss, Jim Comey, and ultimately into the White House. And by the way, Bill Priestap, the boss of Peter Strzok, and the second to Andrew McCabe, is most likely providing information regarding the criminality to a seated grand jury today. Again, I'm going to be getting into a lot of this week. Devin Nunes knows what we don't know, and that's what's behind those redactions that will be unredacted and declassified for all to see. He knows. And I will say this, the media knows and are complicit, because remember the James Wolfe situation with Allie Watkins, the 82 text messages sent to Allie Watkins by James Wolfe, that member of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. The FISA application, 82 pages long. The media received Allie Watkins, and ultimately the media received the full unredacted version of what we are waiting right now. And that's why they're so terrified, so afraid of any of any declassification and redactions being lifted, because that will reveal number one, the criminality of the Obama White House, and secondly, and of equal importance, the criminality of the fifth column of the media in this case, and even the criminality of some senators and some elected members in the House as well. Please stay tuned for more programs this week. Doug Hagmann Radio Show. A lot of information to uncover. And again, please accept my thanks for staying with me. And may God bless you. You have a great day today. More tomorrow. A lot more tomorrow. A lot more in depth tomorrow. May God bless each and every. Don't forget, tune in tonight. Peter Berry Chocolate tonight as well on the Hagmann Report. May God bless each and every one of you. Thank you so much for your belief and trust in me, this show, and our platform. Have a wonderful Monday. Until tonight, God bless.
The Doug Hagmann Radio Show is brought to you by the Hagmann Report. Tune in to the Hagmann Report weekdays, 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. For more information, go to HagmannReport.com. That's HagmannReport.com.